Hey, thanks.
Good evening, CJ.
Great. Glad you're there. All right. Okay.
I guess I could stop the recording now and then restart it at 7 o'clock.
Great. Yeah, that sounds good. Like a good idea.
Okay, we have a Zoom meeting here for July 2nd on the Genesis autopilots, and got a couple of real good experts. So now we have a chance to talk and get ready for the presentation, which will start at 7:30. If you want to talk, unmute, go to it.
Well, this would be an item for later discussion, but I found out about a Comanche 180 should be coming up for sale within the next 2 weeks. It's maintained by an A&P, and one of the words, I can't remember if my friend's description of the airplane was either A, immaculate, or B, pristine. So that should be in about 2 weeks. So maybe we'll put that up for part of the swap meet or just general announcements.
Hey, Pete, can I throw in just a general question? Are we just having general questions at the minute?
Go for it. Bring it up.
Yeah.
I want to start chasing a fuel smell in my cabin. Anybody got a few tips? I've heard O-ring in the selector. Is there any other tips? Just while I've got a few people who know more than me on the call.
Yeah, we had that. Oh God, I had that a couple of decades ago, and it turns out the fuel cap was a little worn, and something in the suction system, and it wasn't getting a proper seal.
Yeah, right.
So now one of the things the previous owner did on this airplane is when he got gas, he did 3 half turns of the top connector, that when he turns it, because you'll get some people that'll just want to go and crank it down until they can't squeeze it anymore. What he standardized on was 3 half turns, which means you don't necessarily let the guy that's putting the fuel in tighten it down. You do it yourself.
Yeah.
But with that 3 half turn thing, I haven't noticed it at all, but I'm trying to remember 20 or 30 years ago, because we had a lot of problems with that smell. If memory serves me correctly, it was the gasket on the fuel cap.
Okay. That's great. Any other tips? I think my aircraft had new bladders put in 2008, I believe, when it arrived in Australia. That's in my documentation, but I mean, they may still, depending on what, I keep them full now, which I've sort of learned from these conversations. But the previous owner may not have, I don't know. So maybe they're a bit brittle too around the top. I had heard that the O-ring in the fuel selector can be worn as well, and that can let the smell into the cabin. But I just if I can collect a few ideas, and I can take them to our LAMI, which is, I guess, your A&P, to have a look at it.
I had a problem with my Comanche. The fuel bladders were old. In fact, they were original in my 1960 Comanche, and we discovered that there's a rib right above the tank from the front and back of the wing, and the fuel bladder was rubbing on it and actually cut through the bladder.
Right.
So that whenever I landed, especially when I landed firmly, which is typical, the gas sloshed around and went out through that crack. So every time after landing, I could smell gas. It didn't leak because it was on the top of the tank, but I couldn't fill the tank all the way up without it coming out through that slit.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I'm making a note of that one as well. Well, mine's more just like I turn up at the hangar, open the door, and you just get that you know, that avgas smell inside the cabin. I've got to everything. It's just a bit off-putting for anyone who jumps in, but very quickly it seems to dissipate. Either it dissipates or you just get used to it. But once you sort of pull the aircraft out and sort of get, you know, started up, and that you just don't even notice it again. But yeah, there's obviously a few different things to look at, and some of them are going to be easier.
Yeah, Malcolm Dickinson, who is just a superb CFII, and he's one of the Comanche instructors. What he mentioned to me was, this is, you have a drain valve very near to the, where you secure the gas cap. So what might happen is, if that drain valve is clogged and you overfill a little bit, you'll just have gas sloshing around on the top.
Right. Okay. That's another one.
Yeah, there's I believe it's inboard towards the fuselage. So on one side it's on the right and the other side it's on the left. But if I remember Malcolm correctly, it's inboard, and it's a small drainage thing, so that if, for example, if your bird is outside and it rains and there's leakage that comes down through the top, this will be so that it's exported overboard and not pooled by your gas cap.
Okay. I've got this single, and it lives indoors, but I mean, all of these things are, like, I'm just writing a list as you talk. Thank you. It's very kind. So yeah, when I'm going to get my we call them a lamey here, but equivalent of an AMP, I'm just going to get him to go through and tick a few of them off, just to try and find the culprit. But I won't take up everyone's time. That was very kind. Thank you.
No problem. Hey, what curiosity question? What's local time for you?
What? Sorry.
Local time.
The time here is 9:05 in the morning, Friday morning in Brisbane, Australia.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm actually in the office, just snuck into a meeting room to listen to what Doug has to say. Hi, Doug.
Oh, I appreciate that. Like I said, we'll give everyone some time to get here, and then we'll get going. Mike will start off with some generalized information, and I'll have some more pilot and owner specific information as well.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I really enjoy having the opportunity to sit in on these calls. The information is just invaluable to me as a relatively very new owner. Really, I bought my aircraft at the end of 18, so I'm a very new owner, pretty new pilot. So I'm a big sponge at the moment, absorbing everything.
Yep.
We have a couple. So our presenters always start at 7:30. We left this one clear for Genesis because unlike some of the other autopilot providers for Comanche, Genesis is a pretty substantial installed base. So we have both avionics integration topics, and we have upgrade stuff. So that we're expecting Doug and Mike to be busy tonight. The other thing is, this is just sort of to kick around. We've been getting people emailing us with some pretty great items that they have that are for other Comanche pilots. One is a United barometric pressure sensing altimeter that can be used, for example, if you wanted to keep your steam gauges and drive the S-Tec 3100. And those are normally, I think, an $8,000 unit. And he's like, I happen to have a spare. It's under warranty until November 2020, and it's 8130 tagged. So if somebody wants that, he's like, I paid $1,500 for it. Make me an offer. And then another person who just happened to have a spare carbon fiber spinner that came with his propeller, 2-plate, I think. And he was like, they're telling me it's $2,500, but if somebody wants it, send me $250. So we're getting enough of these kinds of stories that we thought, one possible way to make this work is just if you have something that's extra that you would be willing to part with that you think might help another Comanche driver, whether it's a, brand new, if you bought a new $8,000 barometric pressure sensing and sending altimeter, or a switch, which I have gone looking for switches for our panels, and they're not always easy to find, paste it into the chat window, and we will gather it up when we can and put it into a spreadsheet that everybody can get into and out of. In the meanwhile, they'll always be searchable in the Comanche Zoom recordings. And just if you do put a part in there that you are able to spare, you think somebody else might use, just put part : to start it out in capital letters, so that when we're reading through to moderate the Q&A, we can skip those for now. But everybody else can go into the chat to find them. And by the way, I'm CJ Stumpf. I'm currently basing out of Vermont and New Hampshire. I'm flying a PA-24-180. I usually fly a 260B. And if you all want to jump in and just say who you are, where you are, and what you fly, that would be awesome. David Towson, I'm tagging you just because you're from a cool place.
Oh, okay. Well, I've just, I think I've just bored everyone a little bit. But anyway, David Howson, I'm from Brisbane, Australia. I fly a PA-24-260C, current registration, VH Sierra Mike Juliet. Previous registration, November 9319 Papa, I think you say, which CJ has sent me some information on, which was fabulous. And aircraft's based at Archfield Airport here in Australia.
Good deal. Jump into a quiet space, just like if you were talking to a busy ATC.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, I'm Robert Klein. I live near Charlottesville, Virginia, and I fly a 180 that's got a lot of instrumentation, and I have a lot of studying to try to catch up so I know what all this stuff is telling me.
My name is Joe McCardle. I fly helicopters, but I'm here trying to learn some more about Comanche communities. I have a shop, I run an avionics shop, Northeast Air in Portland, Maine, and kind of just trying to gather some information for one of my customers.
Cool.
Awesome. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Andy. I fly a Comanche 250 that I just purchased in January of this year with some help from Kristen, and I'm based in Oakland.
Welcome, Andy.
Welcome to the community. By the way, we're putting together a Zoom that'll be in a couple more weeks called Top 10 Tips for New Comanche Owners. That's my teaser.
I'll definitely be interested.
So am I, and I'm not new.
Yeah, it might be appropriate for old Comanche owners too.
Oh, it will be, but it's got a cooler title if it's for new.
Yeah.
Sorry, everybody. Keep on going. This is fun.
Zed Pepper here. Got a PA-30 Miller Turbo 200.
Your airplane's kind of famous. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
Hey, what altitude do you normally cruise at? If you had your choice, what altitude would you fly?
If I'm just going somewhere between 9,000 and 11,000, if we got to deal with ice, well, whatever I need.
What's the highest you've been in it?
I've taken this one up to, I think, around 18,000. It likes it at that or below, between 14 and 18. It does real good, but if you try to push it up a lot higher, you know, it struggles a little bit, but it'll get up there. But it operates the best between 14 and 18. But I normally, unless I have to, I'm still staying down between 9 and 11 where I can still kick the turbos in. It makes a big difference.
Sweet. Cool. Thanks for being here. Everybody else, hop in.
Don Pitts, Lovington, New Mexico. I fly a 260B, a 66 model.
Good deal.
Jim Peters, I'm from
Your field elevation where you are. You need to unmute, Don. What's your field elevation?
Our field is 3975 is our field at Lovington.
How far do you crank out the mixture for takeoff, or are you low enough to go full rich?
No, I don't take off full rich. I lean it out some before I take off here.
Thank you.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. I'm Matthew Smith. I fly 6065 260B, 8880 Papa, and in my spare time, I guess I run that new Comanche documentation website with all the service manuals on it. Based out of Hawthorne, California, and I've been flying Comanches for 2.5 years now.
Good deal. And did I hear Jim Peters?
Yes, I'm from Brisbane. My Comanche flew the Pacific in '75, and I've had it since then. PA-30B.
Welcome, and thank you so much for being here. Great to have you.
CJ, Jim and I connected yesterday over the phone for the first time. We're about 15 minutes apart by car.
You are kidding. All right.
Not-
Expect me to reach out to you more quietly about the GAP program. Well, folks, we've got 25 in here, I think, or so, and so jump on in.
Well, since it's a lull in conversation, I think I'll take a chance here to share some screens. I'll give you a quick view of the website, just so you see what we got going on here. This is at northeastcomanche.org. That's our normal website. The Comanche Zooms are listed on this page. As you can see, there's a whole bunch that we have done and a bunch more that we're planning to do. Tonight is the S-Tec 3100. Then next week is the Trio Autopilot. And then the president of the Piper Museum, John Brierton, will be talking to us about the birthplace of the Comanche in Lock Haven, Pennsylvania. Then, although it's not in order yet, Part 43 maintenance by you, Comanche speed mods, the second version of the AME discussion, or not version, second installment, and the tailhorn ID, will it go away? The Comanche ops and maintenance with Zach Grant, long distance flying tips. If you fly the Pacific, I guess that's long distance. And then the 1,000-hour gear maintenance, AD and review by Kurt and Newbert. That one is going to have to be earlier because they have a drop dead time when they can no longer function during the day. So we're going to go earlier for them. If you're on this page and you want to get a hold of, be a register for here, this is the registration from that link. As you can see right now, where it's set up for the pilot. Here's all the rest of them as they come up. And filling it in is simple. I've done it, so therefore it fills in automatically for me. But here's the cool thing. Some of our Zoom things are available for Wings credit. So if you check this box and it is available for Wings, your name and email address goes to the FAA and you will get credit. Sometimes we have mini clinics available, and if you have anything that you want to say, you're welcome to put it in there. If you're not already on the mailing list, check this and we'll get you there. And then you hit send and it comes to me and we're all set to go. So just like that. If we go now back to, I'll give it a sharing here. All right. Oh, shoot, now I lost it. There it is. I share the screen now. Then we have a help needed kind of deal. The Comanche GAP program, we're trying to get that going. Bill Kniff has been working tirelessly on it. And unfortunately, he's gotten pushed back to the back seat of the plane, basically, because we've been so busy with these Zooms. The Piper Museum has got some problems because they have lost their tenant, which covered their rent, and they could use some help. Either finding somebody to move in to that space or to, sorry, I lost it again, but they could also use some help in terms of financial. And then we're going to work on doing a Zoom swap. So end of sharing. We got about 10 minutes until we begin the actual presentation. So if anybody's got anything to say, unmute and talk.
Pete and CJ, is it possible, and it may already exist, there's, you know, some hard to find parts, like I want to do some work on my panel, and I'd like my switches, you know, pitot heat and all those sorts of things are pretty worn. There has been some talk on the Facebook page, but it would just be interesting whether we could, you know, maybe have sort of an area where we could keep a list of where those parts are available from. I'm not,
Yes.
you know, I know that's
Yep.
probably a pretty hard job, but there are some, you know, some parts that, yeah, just some simple sort of stuff that people tend to be kicking around looking for from time to time.
Absolutely. So you've probably seen on Facebook that there are a couple of initiatives going on for a few key hard to source parts. Kristen Winter and Hans Newbert. So Kristen Winter, who is the head of the Airworthy Comanche Forum on Delphi, and Hans Newbert, who is an FAA DER, are working on, for example, a new, it's the doubler on the, it's for the aileron ED, where you have to go in and look for cracks on the inboard. I'm having a senior moment. So that's in progress. There's a couple of others in progress, but we are starting to collect those needed areas. And so again, if you have something that you have available, put it into the chat for now as part. And if you have something you need, it would actually really help if you can put it into the chat and just put in capitals need, capital NEED. And then for some of the things like switches, one of the things that Eric Jones was looking for his Turbo 260C was engraved switches for some of the worn stuff around the throttle quadrant, or engraved labels. And he was able to source some. In addition, there's an avionics shop called Green Mountain Avionics that's got a whole lot of tooling material and is able to laser engrave thin metal pieces if you want things like that. So we're in the sort of early to early middle stages of starting to collect those. But if you've got needs, you can email them to us. You can put it into the chat and we'll collect it from there. And your keywords will be part and need.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's good for all of us. And if you feel like it, folks, just jump in, say who you are, where you are, and what you fly.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tom from Sturbridge. I'm a brand new 250 owner. I bought it in January. Been battling getting my wheels redone for the last 5 weeks. Just got the 337 signed off on all my new wheels. And I'm interested in tonight's presentation because I've been battling an altitude hold with my problem with my S-Tec 50.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the right place, Tom. Welcome.
Yeah.
This is Jeff Gaskell. I've got a 260B and a 55X in it already, and I've already put some money down on the 3100, so I'm hoping to get it done the sooner the better. I love the autopilot the way it is, but with AHRS, it'll be that much better.
Good to see your face, Jeff. Jeff
Yes.
is, you'll run into Jeff at Oshkosh every year.
Yes.
You shall come when they
Not
reopen
this
that
year.
next year.
Yeah.
Nope. That's why we're here.
That gives a whole new meaning to social distancing.
Yes. And someone was talking about parts just briefly before this, and I've had my Comanche for 31, 32 years now, this B model. And honestly, of course, in the first 10 years, it didn't need many parts. It was still a fairly new plane. But I've really not had that much trouble between Webco, Comanche gear, and a few salvage yards. I've been able to really find about everything I ever needed for it.
What kind of parts are usually needed for these Comanches? My customer's got a PA 24-180 with a 260, 250 engine upgrade. We're redoing the instrument panel, so I might have some stuff left over.
We just might be interested. I'm flying a 180 right now that's got a comm radio, and that's it. So, and I'm flying it all around the Northeast, which has got bumps and weather, and it needs an avionics upgrade. So we've been shopping.
Well, if I'm allowed to promote here, it's a question first. Then you can reach me at Joseph, JOSEPH, M as in Mike, at northeastair.com.
Why don't you put that into the chat window?
I'm new to Zoom, so I'm gonna have to figure it out here.
All right. Okay.
That's actually a really helpful question then, because generally for Q&A, if you're attending by conference call, you can text 617-816-8766 and we'll include your questions via text. But if you're on the Zoom session right now, for most people, touch your screen and see if something pops up and look for 3 little dots with more on it. And if you click on that, click chat. For people attending from computers, let's see here. Anybody got a computer and can give somebody directions?
There's a menu bar either at the bottom or the top of the screen, and chat's right in the middle of it.
All you have to do is scroll, take your mouse down over the bottom of the screen, and that menu shows up. While I'm talking, Brad Hewlett, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Comanche 250, 1961.
Great plane.
I love it.
Yeah.
What serial number?
You know, you'd think a guy would know that off the top of his head. I can't think of it at the moment.
What about the N number?
It's Canadian. Charlie Fox, November Echo Kilo.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a mouthful.
It is. Here.
Hi there, this is Robin. My husband and I, Nick, are in California, and we have a 1966 Comanche 260B.
Robin and Nick, good to see you on.
Yeah, hi, CJ.
My favorite model.
Well, if you feel like it, folks, if you're new, just got on, jump in and just say who you are, where you are, and what you fly.
Yeah, we got about 2 minutes or so till we can roll into the presentation.
So how cheap did everybody's gas get with the COVID gas crisis or whatever? Just curious around the country, how cheap did it get? It got to $2.99 in the Kansas City area. That's self-serve, of course.
That's not bad at all. It's ours went down to $4.75.
Oh,
Yeah, well, I may have you beat. I think I was 515.
We were at
Recently.
555 at this is
At
Connecticut. We were at
self-serve.
555.
Yeah.
yeah, we're back up about 25, 26 cents above that now. But I was just in Colorado last week, and it was even full serve was around $4.50, I think, and 450. You could get less at self serve. maybe 375. That was in the mountains also, where it's always higher usually.
CJ, what do you pay?
Well, for me, let's see. I was flying back from Illinois to Vermont 2 weeks ago, and the lowest that I saw was right outside of, I'm trying to remember which part of Ohio, at $2.43 a gallon. And I
Whoa.
thought about heading over there, and then I was like, it's not actually going to make it cheaper if I go that way. So my cheapest was $3.16 at Rome, New York. K Romeo Mike Echo. Not terrible. I was happy.
That's not bad.
Where's your home base, CJ?
I go back and forth between Montpelier, Vermont, which is usually summer, and then either Lebanon, New Hampshire, Kilo Lima Echo Bravo, and then my folks live in Westerly, Rhode Island, so Whiskey Sierra Tango, and that's why I'm also flying a 260B, because that's the family airplane. And then I'm plane sitting 180 for one of our service people that is stationed overseas until he can get back.
Okay, it's 7:30. I'm going to mute all at this point. You will have the opportunity, if you want to, you can unmute yourself if you need to talk. And it's time for the presentation. And Mike and Doug are going to take over talking about Genesis 3100. I would suggest everybody go to the speaker view. That'll give you a view of the person who is actually talking and an open space for them to share in. And I will also turn on, since I just now remembered it, the share screen so they can do that. So if everybody goes to speaker view, Mike and Doug, you're on.
Hang on one second. If I remember how we did this last night, we should be going here in a minute. Oop, 1 second.
You're there.
Yeah, let me just get it up a little bit bigger for those of us that have poor eyesight. There we go. First of all, thanks everyone. Doug and I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about our newest autopilot. We will talk about a System 50 later if you hang around. I'll tell you right now, I'm a sales guy, so if you're having a problem with an autopilot, you need to buy a new one. However, keep in mind, all of the autopilots that S-Tec has ever made are still supported, both in the field by a great dealer network, and they're fully repairable. So I'm sure we can get your System 50 working right. But first, we're here to talk about our newest autopilot, the S-Tec 3100. First of all, can you hear me all right? Give me a high sign if that's good. Okay, yes. Good. Then I won't scream anymore. As I said, I'm here with Doug Tellef. I'm regional sales manager. I cover about the eastern third of the country. Doug, not too long ago, was one of our inside salespeople, but has transitioned to field service, and he's also our test pilot. And in fact, we'll be flying the PA-24 for our certification effort. So the initial part of this is just kind of the system description and such, and I'll go through that. When it gets into the system operation, Doug is going to take over. So that's how we're going to kind of tag team this. Here's just some stuff that we'll go through this evening. What the system is, the different configurations, in other words, what other equipment does the 3100 work with. Doug will get into the basic operations and then some best practices with the 3100. And lastly, we'll cover where we are with the certification. So it's not too bad. It's only about 260 slides. We should have you out of here well before 10 Eastern, so not a problem. Basically, the S-Tec 3100 is quite a departure for S-Tec. It's a digital autopilot. It's a brand new autopilot, so it would be. It's an attitude-based autopilot, which is also a little bit different. In particular, for the PA-24, it will be a two-axis autopilot. We're not going to certify the yaw. Over the years, S-Tec has made a yaw damper system, and we've sold probably like one of them into PA-24. So it's not really an option, a necessary option or a necessary expense. It's very versatile, like all our autopilots. It can interface to any digital system. It can interface to many analog systems. Right now, we're well over 100 different aircraft that we have the S-Tec 3100 certified in. And another big feature is that you can upgrade any S-Tec autopilot to the 3100, and we'll get into how you do that in a little bit. As I said, it's an attitude-based autopilot versus our traditional analog autopilots, which use the turn coordinator for a roll reference and various pitch sensors for the pitch reference. This is attitude-based. It has an attitude sensor that's built into the autopilot, so no external attitude source is required. Depending on the application, there can be minimal external equipment that's needed. I mean, basically the system is the autopilot controller, which is also the computer and mode annunciator, and the servos, and then whatever interconnect wiring there is. And as I said, it can interface from analog gauges to the latest EFIS systems. The controls are all on the face of the unit. In the upper left are the system controls, our autopilot, flight director, and then yaw damper, if it's available, would be there. The flight director capability is built in. It has built-in pre-select capability, little asterisk there because there may be some external equipment required for that. And then control wheel steering and go around function switches. Lateral modes, just about everything you'd expect in a modern autopilot. It has a roll, hold, heading, nav, approach, built-in GPSS converter, can fly GPS approaches. The vertical modes, it has a pitch attitude hold, altitude hold, vertical speed, indicated airspeed mode, which is new for all of our autopilots, a glide slope mode, and then a GPS vertical mode, which is the GPS glide slope. Something to note on all of our systems, automatic pitch trim is standard. So no more listening to the beep and hitting the trim wheel or whatever. The aircraft will keep itself in trim. A couple other innovations that we have, it has a straight and level mode. Where if you press the LVL button, which is just about front and center, the aircraft will come back to pitch and roll attitude hold in a straight and level attitude. That mode is active whether the autopilot is actually engaged or not. Obviously, the system has to be turned on, but if you're hand flying the aircraft and you press that level button, the autopilot will turn on and get you back to straight and level mode. It has an active envelope protection, which prevents overspeed, underspeed, and roll exceedances. In the active mode, in other words, when the autopilot is engaged, it will automatically reduce your airspeed or increase your airspeed, etc. The passive mode is it'll be in your headsets, like if you're flying the flight director. It'll give you alerts that you're going, underspeed, overspeed, etc. As I said, there's actually very few components in the 3100 system. The programmer computer is the functions that you see here. It's the mode controller, and you can see that across the bottom of the unit. It has all the mode enunciations, roll on the left and pitch on the right. The attitude pre-select controller is on the right side, the two concentric knobs. The up-down, just to the left of that, is for setting vertical speed and indicated airspeed targets. It has both digital and flight director output capabilities. And as I said, the ADAHRS AHARS, I'm sorry, is built in to the unit, and that's the system attitude source. For the PA-24, there'll be 3 servos, a roll pitch, and pitch trim. I'd like to talk about that for a minute because we took an interesting design approach here. When several years ago, when we were starting to do the design of the 3100, we asked our customers, installation shops, our own repair station, what's good and what's bad about our autopilots and where can we improve. And the answer really came down to, we need an updated controller and a computer. And we asked, what about the servos? And they said, well, you know, your servos are actually very reliable. And it doesn't take long. And although, unfortunately, not this year at a Sun and Fun or an Oshkosh or an AOPA, but invariably at one of those shows, it's not hard to have a user come up and say, you know, I've had this thing installed for 20 years and it just works. And they do. One of the issues with our servos, though, with our analog autopilots is they use a drive technique called a voltage ramp, where if as the autopilot started to deviate in pitch or roll, the controller would send out a very small DC signal, 1.5 volts, 2 volts, to just get the servo to turn to get the aircraft back into whatever situation, back on altitude or back on heading. As the servo aged, that startup voltage would increase. And now you'd get, for example, pitch porpoising is a good example of a dirty motor in a pitch servo, because now instead of taking 1.5 volts or 2 volts to get the pitch servo to operate, it might take 2.5 or even more. And now the aircraft has a chance to deviate from where it's supposed to be to a great degree. What we've done is with the 3100, we use a drive technique called pulse width modulation. And we use very rapid pulses of full aircraft voltage to get the motor to turn. And what that does is it virtually eliminates that startup voltage issue. So the main failure mechanism of our servos has been essentially eliminated. The other thing we do is when the autopilot starts up and goes through its self-test mode, it actually spins the servos in both directions for several seconds to give them kind of a self-clean and that kind of thing. The other thing that it does is that by using these servos, it allows us to reuse them in an upgrade. And if you already have an S-Tec autopilot, you can upgrade for sometimes less than half the cost of a full new system. And we'll talk about that towards the end. But there were some very strong reasons why we kept those servos. Last thing, and I should probably mention this, when we talked to our repair station, S-Tec has been around now for a little over 40 years. I think we started in 1978. And now we have shipped, if not over, we're very close to 41,000 autopilots. So that's probably somewhere on the order of 100,000 servos that we have shipped over that time. Right now in our repair station, we have one guy that fixes servos, and he's not working weekends. So the amount of repairs that we do on them is actually pretty low for the number of units that are in the field. A couple other pieces of interface equipment. These would be used for an analog installation, which I'll talk about in a minute. But the 3100, as I said, is a digital autopilot. And it, as such, it requires digital air data. If you're installing it with some Garmin equipment or with an Aspen, those systems provide that digital air data. If it's an analog panel, we supply, in this case, a Sandia air data computer that does that analog to digital conversion for us. We also have an analog flight director interface, and then there's a heading converter if you're using an analog HSI. And we work with, put it this way, if you have, as an example, an S-Tec autopilot now, the 3100 will be able to work with the HSI that you have installed. So we'll talk about configurations, and there's a few of these. I'll say the first one we'll talk about is the analog installation, and I just was talking about that. It's just your basic analog 6-pack. The couple of things to keep in mind. The altitude pre-select function does work with the Sandia air data computer, but it does the Sandia ADC does require a 0 to 5 volt barrel correction signal in order for that to operate. So if you have a encoding altimeter where you set the Colesman window, that output of that unit will go to the Sandia and enable the altitude pre-select in the unit. The flight director does require that flight director interface that I pointed out. If altitude pre-select is enabled, you would set those on the face of the unit using the select knob or the up-down buttons. And it is the 3100, it does work with some DGs. Obviously, those have to have a heading bug output, but it's strongly recommended that you use an HSI, because with both heading and course, now the 3100 can compute intercepts. If you only have a DG, it cannot do that.
Mike, let me jump in here just to clarify one thing real quick.
Go ahead,
On the altitude pre-select with the steam gauge here in the 6-pack, like Mike mentioned, it does need to be an altimeter that transmits that baro signal so that can be read by the Sandia air data computer. So a lot of the altimeters out there, even though you're dialing in your baro setting into the Colesman window there, that signal might not be transmitted out in a way that can be used. So you would need something such as a United B model that CJ mentioned, that they've got one that a customer or one of their members is going to be selling. The United B model is a popular way to do it. There are some other ways to do it to get that baro correction signal to it as well. If you have an old ST360 in there, which was one of our altitude pre-selectors, that will do the job. It's a little bit clunky. It's not as nice as the digital format, but that works. Or if you're planning on doing a standby electric system like an MD302 or an ESI 500, those will also give the baro signal necessary, although those are also a little bit more pricey options as well. But I would definitely check with your dealer when they're quoting out the install. If you're sticking with the steam gauges, I would definitely check with your dealer to verify that your altimeter is one of the ones that will put out that signal to be read by the Sandia to enable altitude pre-select, just so you don't get surprised.
And just to mention, if that signal is not available, the autopilot functions perfectly without it. It's just that you cannot do the altitude pre-select. You still have altitude hold mode, you still have vertical speed mode, you still have indicated airspeed mode. So all the modes are available. It's just that the altitude pre-select function is not available.
Right, so you would just need to manage your level off in that case.
Right. Next, it would be like with the Garmin G5. Garmin G5 initially, when we started working with this system, we basically treat it as an analog system. The G5 in the HSI position with GAD29B emulates the KI525 HSI, and that's what we treated it as. We recently have been doing some engineering work, and we have discovered that in some applications, and we're working on to do this across all our STCs, is that we will be able to use the G5 as the air data source, including the barrel correction. So altitude pre-select will be enabled. Flight director modes or the flight director is not available. The Garmin or the G5 in the ADI position does not accept external flight director signaling. And then for altitude pre-select, the targets would be set on the face of the unit. So you use the altitude select knobs on the right side and the vertical speed indicated airspeed buttons up and down. As it says on the G5 HSI, you would still set heading and course on that unit. So right now we have that flying on our Cessna 182s and the Bonanza options. It will be available on the PA-24 because we'll verify that during our STC testing, and we're gradually over the next few months will incorporate that into all of our other STCs. So that's looking pretty good for the G5s.
Yeah, that's a huge change. And like Mike mentioned, that's something that has been recent, even as of this week, was getting the approval and making the gain changes on the 182s. We will have to go back and verify the other STCs, but like Mike mentioned there, we already know the changes that need to be made going forward, so that's not something that we'll have to likely do additional flight testing. But that is huge because that does help save you quite a bit when pricing out the system. Not only does it save you on the cost because you're not having to pick up a United B model or spend $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 on an electric standby, so it saves you pretty significantly there. It also helps you out on planning your panel out, since you're not having to cut an extra hole for an electric standby or plan something different with an altimeter.
You wouldn't use the Sandia ADC is no longer required, so it simplifies the installation, reduces the number of connections, reduces the wiring that's there. So it's kind of a win-win all the way around.
Yeah, we're pretty excited about that. That's a real good change for everyone.
With the Aspen EFD 1000 and the E5. And now I'm going to talk about the way the Aspen exists today, not the Aspen Max, or that's on the next slide. So this is just an existing Aspen installation. As I said, we use the data from the EFD 1000 for our digital air data. But unfortunately, this unit does not output the indicated airspeed label. When it was designed, there was no external unit that needed that label, so they did not output the data. What that does is it disables the indicated airspeed mode in the 3100, and it also disables the envelope protection feature because that is based on indicated airspeed. We do have an indicated airspeed kit that's available that would supply that, but just out of the standard Aspen EFD, that is not available. Altitude pre-select does work. The barrel correction signal does come from the Aspen to the 3100, and you set the targets via the face of the 3100. And again, that's done except for heading and course that's using the Aspen heading and course outputs. The next big change, and we'll see that in the coming months, is the ProMax PFD with the Aspen's 3100 integration software. It'll be a great interface. It is a purely digital interface. All of the features and functions of the 3100 are available. Autopilot modes will be displayed on the PFD. The targets can be selected either through the on the face of the Aspen unit or on the 3100, and as it says, it'll be bidirectional. So it'll be a very slick interface. We've had our engineers working with Aspen all this year. Right now, from what I understand, that software is at Aspen going through their FAA certification process. I just saw a note today that because of COVID shutdowns in New Mexico and quarantine requirements, that is kind of going to drag for a little while, hopefully not too long, but basically what it is they rely on, I believe, an out-of-state FAA examiner to come and oversee their testing. And he is unable to visit New Mexico now because of quarantine requirements. So anyway, we're getting there. The step after that, after Aspen has received certification of the software, we'll have to do flight testing to get it approved with ours. But since we've already flown it, that's not going to be a huge technical hurdle. It'll be kind of a time hurdle because we'll have to fly it in several different airplanes, but there's no issues about whether it's going to work or not. So we're plugging away at it. We're a lot closer than we were in the past. And when that comes out, it's going to be a beautiful system. The 3100 and the Pro Max will integrate beautifully. So. The other option is the Garmin G500, 600, or the equivalent TXI units. Again, this is a completely digital unit, so it's a digital interconnect. All of the features and functions of the 3100 are available. You can set the altitude targets and such on the face of the Garmin equipment. Autopilot mode enunciations are not displayed because Garmin does not input that data from autopilots. So it's so you're not going to see that, but they are still available on the face of the unit. The flight director is available because it's again a digital interconnect. And another thing we're working on, and I put it in here because it's very similar, is we'll be able to work with the new Garmin 275 units. In fact, the PA24 that we're doing our certification in is equipped with 2 Garmin 275, so it will also be our test bed for that interface. According to everything we understand, it will be the same interface that you get with a G500. So it's, again, all digital, and it should be a pretty slick interface. Here, just some details about that interface and some things that we have discovered. As I said, Garmin equipment doesn't input data from external equipment. So things like if you set or reset the altitude target on the 3100, the Garmin equipment doesn't receive that. So it just, like it says, you'll see dashed lines. The synthetic vision, and Doug, maybe you can explain this a little bit better, but because of the scaling of the pitch ladder, when you press the go around button, it may appear to be a little bit different than what the autopilot's actually flying. So.
Sure, yeah, and this is something where it's more of a nice to know. It's not an issue. It's not, you're not losing functionality. In fact, like Mike mentioned here, with the 500, 600 TXI and most likely the GI 275s, you will get full functionality without the need for additional hardware. It's more of just from a pilot's perspective, a good to know. I always suggest driving the system from the TXI. Set your bugs, your IS or VS, your altitude pre-select, set those on the TXI, because if you set them on the TXI, the 3100 sees that and it's going to do as you told it to. If you set the bugs and your targets on the 3100 bezel, obviously the 3100 knows that you're wanting to make a change, so it does that. But since the Garmin's not taking that input, the bugs won't move on the Garmin side, so it can lead to some confusion. So it's not an issue or anything. It's just a good to know and a best practice thing of driving it from the TXI. And then, yeah, Mike is right. If you have synthetic vision on takeoff, it puts the steering bars in what looks like they're higher pitch angle than they are. And that's, again, it's a good to know of, okay, I'm not actually pitching up to 12 or 15 degrees here. You're still pitching to where the bars are, but you would see if you turn synthetic vision off that it would go back to that 8 degrees above the horizon that it's set for.
All right, I'll turn it over to Doug. If you see Doug waving, he's given me an indication to change the slide because the slide's on my computer, not on his. So
Right.
Doug, take it away.
All right, so get in some basic operations here in the pre-flight. So when you first power on, when you throw on your avionics master and making sure that you've got your autopilot and trim master switches turned on, you'll see it'll go through a self-test here. And Mike already kind of covered this. It's going through, it's checking to make sure that it's getting all of its external sources and signals that it's looking for. And it's also running those servos. Some of the older legacy S-Tec units, you may have heard something called a burn-in procedure, where as it starts, getting a little pitch porpoise or something, the shop will take it out and they'll run it for a minute in one direction, run it for a minute in another direction to clean up any carbon in there. That's basically what it's doing every time during the self-test to help keep everything running smoothly. Mike, you can just hit, there you go. So you also see the ADAHRs initializing. This is where the boards are settling. We're getting the attitude information. Another kind of good to know thing, this happens pretty quickly on the ground. Don't start moving or taxiing until the ADAHR's initializing screen is cleared, and it goes on to the next screen of AP ready. If you start moving while it's initializing, you're not going to cause any damage. It's just going to take a while for it to initialize. Similar to if you do a reset in flight, it has to go through the ADAHR's initializing process. So if you do a reset, if you cycle power with the master switches in flight, that ADAHR's initializing screen will be up there for a lot longer in flight than it is on the ground, depending upon flight conditions. If you're clearing a million, smooth sailing, and you can hand fly it and hold it pretty steady at the altitude and you're not getting knocked around, it's a little bit quicker. If you're getting some bumps and some up and downs, it does take a while. Once you see the AP ready screen, you know that you are ready to go. So if at any time you see an AP fail state during the cycle, if it happens on the ground, just recycle using the AP master switch, cycle power, let it run it through its setup again. If the AP fail continues, obviously, don't trust it, don't use it, get it into a dealer and get it checked out. That'd be rare that would happen. It could be, if you got some loose wiring back there, that maybe the harness isn't on there quite right, or if the tray got vibrated or knocked and it's not sitting in there just right, and it's got a little bit of room for vibration, that can cause that. And normally it's something super easy fixed by verifying the install. Obviously, if it happens in the air, same procedures, cycle the power. Like we talked about, it's going to take a while for the ADAHR's initializing to complete. Once that's complete, if everything powers up good, should be good to continue. Just monitor it like you would with any other piece of equipment. And if an AP fail continues to happen in the air, again, common sense would say don't use it, get it to a dealer and get it checked out. There's the display ready state. So again, once we're finished powering up, you get your AP ready here. At this point, we'll go through some pre-flight checks. So we'll verify control surface movements match the inputs and the controls are free and correct when the AP is disengaged. So your normal check of pulling the yoke back, left, right, and back in, make sure everything moves smooth. That's another kind of key area, not to get off in the weeds here. That's another critical area that we've seen, not just with the 3100, but we've also seen posts with the GFC autopilot and every other one, where somebody might be chasing some sort of a pitch porpoise issue or a wing rock. That's one of those controls. You should be familiar with your aircraft and how it feels, and know that if you feel some undue friction in there at any point, maybe there's a little roller bearing that needs to be checked or something needs to be lubricated. That can definitely cause some issues that are not an autopilot issue, but can make it seem like there is one. So that's kind of a good to know. And then the detailed pre-flight procedure is listed in the AFMS. I think we got a couple slides here on that. So we're going to check the functionality. So on the left side of the screen, you've got your 3 buttons. On the PA-24, that bottom button will be blank, and that bottom LED will not light up because the PA-24, it's been determined that it doesn't require the yaw damper. So you'll have the 2-axis system with the autopilot and the flight director. when those LED lights are on, that lets you know what mode you're in. So in this case, the autopilot is engaged and the flight director is engaged. You can separately toggle flight director on and off. And in the case of applications like hopefully the PA30 and 39, where there would be a yaw damper, you can cycle the yaw damper on independently from the autopilot as well. So we'll go ahead and press the AP button. You should see all those lights come up. And the flight director bars should come up if you have flight director bars in your setup, and the yaw damper would engage. All right, next slide, Mike.
Oh, I was going to say just a thing to note here. In when you see this display, you're actually in pitch and roll hold. So go back to the old wing leveler. You're holding. Well, this wouldn't hold necessarily level. It's going to hold if you're in flight. It's going to hold the pitch and roll attitude where it was engaged. So that's a little bit different than our previous autopilots, where when you turned them on, they were just ready to go. This is actually going to hold the aircraft in a certain attitude. Obviously, if you're on the ground, all it should do is lock up the yoke, or stiffen up the yoke.
All right, so kind of the common pre-flight checks across all airframes. So when it's sitting in the run-up area, you hit the AP button there to engage it, put it in heading mode. Now you can see a look on the screen here. You've got your active modes on the top and your armed modes on the bottom. So in this case, it's in heading mode, meaning it's going to follow the heading bug. Nav mode is armed. It's set to fly your designated heading until you reach the program nav course. And it's set for a vertical speed of 500 foot per minute up with your altitude pre-select of 12,500. So on the pre-flight check here, we're going to hit heading, put it into heading mode, and then we move the heading bug a little bit left of center. You should feel the yoke start to turn left. You move it right of center. You can feel the yoke start to turn right. The next check is going to be checking your indicated airspeed mode. So you can press IAS, and then you press the up knob to verify that the numbers go up, and the down knob to the down button to verify that it goes down. And then we can also check the VS. So you hold the yoke, you have a neutral position so that the servos aren't driving. You can press VS and put it to a positive rate, and the yoke should move back as if it's starting to climb, and eventually see the trim move as well. And then you can do that in the opposite direction, go down. Just to verify that everything is working in the correct direction as expected. Pretty quick checks on the ground. Don't take more than a few seconds, but highly recommend doing them every time. I know a lot of people have told me that, they're like, I don't do these ground checks. I'm like, just come on, let's get these quick checks in. It won't take more than a few seconds. It's literally heading, move it left, move it right, indicate airspeed, check to make sure the buttons work, and then vertical speed, move it up, move it down. It should be about that fast, but it is an autopilot, it is controlling your aircraft. So let's make sure that everything is working properly before we get in the air. So another check here is you can press out, verify to make sure the out hold replaces the vertical speed as well. Let's see. So we've got your menu button down here on the right. This is where you would control your contrast and your brightness. And we're using the select knob there that you'd normally use for altitude pre-select. Once you go into menu, the outer knob controls the contrast, the inner knob controls brightness. These settings will stay where you have them set after a power cycle as well. So it's not something where you would need to adjust every time unless you're going day to night, night to day, and you want those settings dialed in a little bit more to your preference. But those will hold. Once you hit the menu button, you can make your changes. After about 5 seconds of not having any changes input, it will default back to the previous screen and take you out of menu mode. Again, like I talked about here, the display, it's pretty intuitive. You've got all of your lateral stuff on the left with your lateral buttons on the left and your lateral display on the left side of the screen, and then your pitch modes and pitch buttons all on the right. Your active stuff is what's on the top line there. So again, in this case, we're flying a heading bug we've got approach loc armed. So in this case, we're flying, say, 030 to intercept a localizer. Once that needle comes in, then that approach loc will move up and replace heading, letting you know that now you've captured the localizer and you're flying it. And we're also, in this case, descending at 500 foot per minute to a programmed altitude of 2,500, presumably where we would capture the glide slope. Arming lateral mode, again, just talked about this, but here's a little graphic for you. So the 3100 can intercept an LPV, GPSS, VOR localizer at a 45-degree angle by default. So if you don't have it in heading mode and you just hit nav, it will calculate out a 45-degree intercept. If you want to use a pilot selectable angle, for example, if ATC gives you a heading to steer you around some traffic or some weather, or if you requested deviations for some buildup, so you can put it into heading mode and use your heading bug to fly around the clouds, and then you pick a good heading that's going to bring you back in. Then you can move the heading back to intercept your course, and it will then use the angle that you have selected, as long as it's nothing crazy like over 90 degrees, because then you'd be trying to intercept it going backwards. So it won't do that because that doesn't make sense. Altitude pre-select, again, as long as you've got the equipment to do it. So really now with the improvements to the G5 interface, that would basically just be the analog gauges where you'd need a little bit of extra equipment to enable altitude pre-select. So as long as your setup is capable of doing it, you can see here in this case, we are descending at 500 foot per minute to intercept an altitude of 12,500. Now, if you are an analog and you don't have that baro signal going to the Sandia to enable it, in this case, you could still use your vertical speed at a 500 foot per minute descent, and you monitor. And when you start getting closer, you've got a couple different things you can do. You can either use the up down buttons there to reduce your vertical rate, or you could use control wheel steering to level off a little bit there. You could go into a pitch mode and use up and down in a pitch mode, or you can just hit out to put you on out capture when you get to your desired altitude of 12,500. See, again, this mentions, just going back to the previous slide, about what extra equipment you might need and where to set the targets on, depending upon the EFIS. On the Garmin, you're going to drive it by setting the bugs on the Garmin screen. On an Aspen, not an Aspen without the 3100 integration software, so either the Pro 1000 or the Max as it stands currently today, you would want to set those targets on the 3100. And then aggressive changes in throttle, obviously you want to be as smooth as possible. So if you're coming up to the glide slope here and you're making huge power changes while throwing in flaps and gear, it's going to do its best to hold the glide slope, but just understand that it always is better to fly the airplane as smooth as possible. So, like envelope protection. So we've got over bank protection. It's something that you should never see when the autopilot is engaged, obviously, because the autopilot will be limiting you to 20 to 24 degrees rate of turn, depending upon the STC. So you should not get into the over bank situation with the autopilot engaged. If you're operating in flight director mode, so you're hand flying, you want the flight director up. If you roll past 60 degrees of bank, you will get an oral alert that says attitude on there to let you know. If you want to go out and you want to practice commercial maneuvers, you don't want it yelling at you, it's pretty simple. You just disconnect the flight director by tapping that button, and that will turn off, that'll put it back into an AP ready status, and you won't get any oral alerts there. For your overspeed and underspeed protection, these are set per aircraft. It's based upon the stall speed and VNE, VMO for that airframe. So that is something that does come set from the factory that's not adjustable, but it's designed to keep you out of trouble from either stalling or overspeeding the aircraft. when the envelope, when you have envelope protection in active mode, so when the autopilot is in control and flying, it will pitch to maintain your airspeed. So that's something to know. Now that is, I think we probably cover this on a later slide about shooting approaches here. That is inhibited 1,000 feet after glide slope capture. So you don't have to worry when you're slowing down. You don't have to land. You don't have to worry about it trying to pitch down below the glide slope. And same thing when you're in active mode, it will do the pitching when you're in passive mode. So autopilot not engaged, but flight director up, you will get the oral alerts of airspeed. Right. So, yeah, so here's what your LEDs are going to look like depending upon if you're in active or passive mode. When you're in active, so the autopilot will actually pitch to maintain you within the safe window. Then you'll have all 3 lights on. If you're in passive, then you're just going to have the flight director light on. And there's a couple of ways to get in and out of active and passive mode. So obviously by hitting the AP button, the flight director is going to come on at the same time. You will be in active mode. If you want to go into passive mode, so you want to do some hand flying because it's been a while since you've been hand flying, you want the flight director up to give you some guidance, but you also want that safety aspect of knowing that it's going to give you the call outs for overspeed, underspeed, and over bank. Then a quick tap and release of the AP disconnect button will disconnect the autopilot but leave flight director up. If you don't want the flight director up, so you want envelope protection off, let's say you want to fly the approach in slower than the speeds in the AFMS, you know what you're doing, you want control of it and you don't want it yelling at you for doing something you think you're going to do. Or if you want to go out and practice slow flight, then push and hold the disconnect button on the yoke for about 1.5 seconds, and that will disconnect the autopilot, turn off flight director mode, and put you back into an AP ready status and disable the envelope protection alerts. Best practices. So I like to ensure on takeoff, I've always got the heading bug either set to the runway heading or my first turnout based upon the ATC clearance. You can use the go around button to set up your flight directors for wings level and around 8 degrees above the horizon. Just know that that is in a roll pitch mode. So if you hit that go around button on the ground, that will bring up the command bars. It'll be in flight director mode, so the autopilot won't be engaged, but that is in a roll pitch mode only. So it'll fly the command bars until you give it another mode selection. Another thing you can do on the ground is you can set up indicated airspeed mode. I like using indicated airspeed after takeoff. I find it just be a little bit safer, a little bit smoother and more consistent than vertical speed. So you can set your indicated airspeed, and you can also program in your target altitude for your initial altitude of your clearance on the ground before takeoff to help reduce the workload. So that way, as soon as you take off, you just reach over and hit autopilot and then engage the modes that you want, be it indicated airspeed, vertical speed, to give you your altitude pre-select, and then heading or nav to either fly the heading bug or the nav course. If an unusual attitude is expected, or something else, if you're flying and you've got partners sitting next to you, say, hey, if anything happens to me, reach over and hit this level button. It'll bring you wings level, and then jump on 121.5 and ask for help. This is available from any powered on state from the autopilot. So the autopilot does not have to be engaged. You don't have to be in flight director mode. You can be in an AP ready status. So that it's already been powered up, it's already initialized the ADAHAR, so it knows its attitude on there. As soon as you hit that level button, it will smoothly roll you back to wings level, and pitch depends upon the aircraft. It's either pitch 0 or pitch just slightly nose above the horizon, and that's different depending upon aircraft. I know from some of the air meetings there was some questions about the limitations on this. So the roll limit, let's see, from level, it is approved to recover from 51 degrees of pitch and 76 degrees of roll. So that's quite a bit. That's quite a bit of an unusual attitude that it will recover from on there. And then somebody else had asked in another one of these Zoom meetings, what's the point at what it can't, and will it just keep trying forever? The autopilot is set to disconnect if it's at a roll limit of 38 degrees and not recovering, or a pitch limit of 22 degrees and not recovering. So again, that would be if you're probably way outside of CG and real heavy, and you get it into an unusual attitude. That's not something that you would normally encounter. As we do, when we're doing the flight test, we do load these things up to the very forward part of that envelope, and we go out and we fly it, and we try and see what it'll do. And we try and put it, in some pretty steep pitch and roll angles and engage level, and make it recover. And then we go out and we move some sandbags
Doug
around
seems
and
to
we
have
load
locked
it
up on us.
to. Oh, I hear you. Do you hear me, Matt? CJ, anybody else hear me?
Oh yeah, I got you now.
You got me now?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, we got a storm moving through here, so I'm not sure if that's playing some games with my internet. I'm not sure where I cut out there, but just saying that, the level mode should be able to recover you from basically any unusual attitude you're going to find yourself in. And we do the flight testing. We load these things up to the forward part of that CG envelope, and we load it to the very aft, very heavy corner of the CG envelope. And we go out and we try and put it in some pretty interesting attitudes and make sure it recovers. I did have the joy of getting to be a mobile ballast and riding as aft weight when we went up and when we were tuning the gains for it the first time. And then got the call from the front of, hey, can you move some weight forward a little bit? Or, you know what, just come up here real quick. So we could come up, so then we could go ahead and adjust the gains to make it more responsive and make sure that even when you're loaded as heavy as possible and as aft as possible, that it will still recover.
Okay.
Let's see. So keep the heading bug target in sync without the flight. That way, if you ever want to go to heading mode, let's say you're flying along on nav, you've been on your flight plan for a while, I like to keep that heading bug centered up. That way, if ATC gives me hey, I need you to make a right turn, 060, you hit heading, and it's not going to start turning you left because that's where you left the bug last time. So I always try and keep that set up. Also, another huge criticality, just like with any other piece of equipment in your aircraft, know your emergency procedures, know how to turn it off and the different ways to turn it off. On the 3100, there's about 4 different ways to turn off the autopilot. There's your autopilot disconnect button, which is the red button in the slide there. Again, a quick press and release will disable the autopilot, leaving it in flight director only mode, or you press and hold the button for a second and a half, and it will disconnect the autopilot completely and turn off the flight director. Also, you've got your AP master and your trim master, your autopilot circuit breaker, and the buttons on the bezel itself. Any of those can be used to disconnect the autopilot. So should you get yourself in some sort of an unusual condition, emergency procedure, the AP disconnect is probably one of the quickest and easiest, fastest ways to disable it. Obviously, if there's any thought in your mind of smoke, fire, smell, anything like that, I would reach over and I'd hit both the AP master and the trim master switches. And the reason you want to hit both is because the 3100 has auto trim. There is power going to that control board inside the 31 control head through that trim master. So just turning off the AP master, you're not going to see the bezel itself turn off. The autopilot will be off. It will not be engaged. You will not be able to engage the servos again, but there will still be power going to the control head. On most installations, those buttons are close enough that you can reach over with one hand and hit them both at the same time. So I would just make sure when you're practicing your procedures that that's something that you're aware of. And again, if you're practicing in this in flight, when you shut off the power with the AP and trim master, if you go to turn it back on because you're done practicing, just know that you're going to want to hold it straight and level for a few minutes to let the attitude source initialize. Mike. Let's see. So here's basically the way the bezel is going to show you for different types of approaches. So for a straight in approach here in the top left, you're going to see approach loc in the active, so the top bar there, and then glide slope. So saying that we've captured the glide slope and we're descending down. Right below that, so a heading to intercept the localizer ILS. Again, just like we talked about earlier, you're in heading mode, you're flying the heading bug, you've armed the approach. Once that needle starts coming in, then it will turn and it will change from what you see there to the screen above it with approach loc in the top, letting you know you've captured the localizer. In this case, on this display, it's in a pitch mode, and you can adjust your pitch with the up and down button there. So if somebody wants, a 3-5 degree, if they want a nice gentle descent, they can use pitch mode or IS or vertical speed to do that. And you can change the pitch with either the up and down button or with the control wheel steering. Same thing, same kind of thought process there on the straight in approach for GPS. You see approach GPSL in the top with your GPSV for your vertical guidance for the glide path on the right, and an out hold to glide slope intercept. So in this case, we're on approach loc, and we're holding at an altitude to intercept the glide slope. So make sure you read through the POH. I'm in the process of rewriting the POH right now. That'll be going out with our next software version that comes out to clarify a lot of these procedures and make sure that it's written from a pilot's point of view to try and clear up everything in there. So just make sure you're reading the POH, follow the AFMS, make sure you're using the correct procedures and buttonology for the different approaches. Another key thing here is if you have a GPS switch, some installations require a GPS 1-2 or a nav 1-2 switch. Make sure that you've got the switch set correct so that you're flying the GPS that you've programmed your approach into and not going, wait, why is it taking me over there? Oh, that's right, because following the wrong GPS. Approach and descent operations. If it's not a straight in approach and sir, the intercept heading is not over 90 degrees, like we talked about, because then if you're over 90 degrees, that means you're going backwards. You're probably going to have to do a procedure turn or a hold to get turned back around. So if you're trying to do a pilot selectable intercept angle, make sure it's something reasonable or at least less than 90 degrees. It will intercept it from 89 degrees. That's one of the tests that we do make. But just keep that in mind. Try and keep something reasonable for an intercept angle. It's always best practice to try and intercept the glide slope at about 1,500 feet AGL. And the reason I mentioned that is, like I said earlier, with the active envelope protection becoming inhibited at 1,000 feet after glide slope capture. So if you capture your glide slope at 1,500 feet, that means the active and passive envelope protections will become disabled at 500 feet AGL. So when you're starting to slow down for land, you're not having it either pitch over, which would be bad, pitching down below the glide slope, low to the ground, or you're not having it yelling at you the whole time while you're trying to slow coming over the fence. If at any point during the approach, you need to alter, you need to level off or make a change or avoid a bird, I find it's best practice to use control wheel steering for those, because control wheel steering will not reset that approach envelope transition point. So if you disconnect the autopilot with the AP disconnect button, and then you avoid your bird, you fly around it, you reach back, you hit AP again, that's going to restart that 1,000 feet after glide slope capture point. So envelope protection might not become inhibited at the point where you're expecting it to. So just kind of a good to know best practice thing there. Just like with any approach, make sure you stabilize your approach before glide slope intercept. It's best not to be making major power changes and throwing in all of your drag while trying to intercept the glide slope from below. Aerodynamics, it always handles a little bit better the faster you're going, and you're not going to be worrying about it pitching down up there. So try and make sure you're using a reasonable approach speed, not dragging it in on the stall warning horn 4 miles out. Try not to implement major, flap input or lowering the gear at the same time glide slope capture. It's always best to do that either a little bit before, a little bit after. Personally, our SOP from the airlines was, a dot below, start putting that in. So that's what I still use. And then after slope capture, I would try and set your missed approach target. So again, this after glide slope capture, once GS has moved up into the active window and you're following the glide slope down, at that point I would set the missed approach altitude target on the altitude pre-select, either on the 3100 or on the EFIS screen, depending upon your situation. That way, in case you have to go missed, it's one less thing you have to do on the missed approach. Again, small power changes, adjust power incrementally with small changes along the glide slope. If the autopilot gets off the glide slope, stabilize the aircraft and the autopilot will correct itself. It actually does a really good job of keeping the localizer and the glide slope centered up. And then last, it shouldn't have to be said, but unfortunately it does. Make sure you disconnect the autopilot before landing. We've had some people say, man, it flared, it doesn't flare great. Like, it's not supposed to. Please disconnect the autopilot before landing. So the go around button here. So if you're going to do a missed approach, you can hit the go around button. This will disengage the autopilot. It will leave the autopilot in flight director mode. So you will get the flight director command bars at wings level and 8 degrees pitch up. And again, you will see pitch roll come across the screen of the autopilot. Keep in mind, again, with go around mode, the idea is to get you either during a takeoff or during a go around to get you away from the ground quickly and safely. So it's only in roll pitch mode. So then you will need to give it another mode if you want to continue to fly the missed approach procedure, or if you're on departure and you're wanting to fly your departure procedure, or if you've got an early level off here, CWS is your friend on this. So what I would do is hit the go around button, put in your power, clean up the aircraft, pitch to the flight director bars. As you start building some speed and your altitude is starting to go to a positive rate here, I like to use CWS to set the pitch angle for what I want. This does a couple of things. It makes sure that you are at the pitch that you want for that given day and that given situation. The other thing it does is it takes you out of toga mode and it puts you into roll pitch mode, which is slightly different because roll pitch mode has your pitch to get you to your altitude pre-select. So if you set your missed approach altitude after glide slope capture, like we talked about, then you go around, you hit the button, you clamp the aircraft, you go, get yourself to the good pitch mode, and you tap CWS. That's going to bring the flight directors to where you are, and then it will also arm your altitude pre-select. At this point, you can also reach over, hit AP to engage the autopilot, and then pick either heading or nav to fly the heading bug or your desired course. And if you want to change the vertical mode from a pitch to a vertical speed or indicate airspeed, you can do that at that time. Super simple, quick procedure. Just go, hit the go around button, power up, clean up, and then CWS if you want. You don't have to. Then reach over, autopilot, heading, indicate airspeed. Couple of seconds, couple of button pushes. Pretty simple, pretty intuitive there. Right.
All right, now the part we've all been waiting for. Where are we? The great news is we've been working on a PA-24. We've had it down in Mineral Wells for a couple of weeks. The installation is going on right now. That is scheduled to be completed towards the end of July. And then there'll be where Mr. Tellef there will step in. There's a series of company flight tests where we tune the autopilot to fly the aircraft. Then there's the actual FAA flight test where we prove the autopilot can handle the aircraft. That should all be done by the end of August. We are doing the certification in a 400, so every PA-24 model will be covered. 180s, 250s, 260s, 400s, ABC, whatever. the whole fleet will be covered by our certification. And again, we're on schedule to have that done, sometime in August. It takes us another 3 to 4 weeks to get what is called PMA, Parts Manufacturing Authorization. And that's the authorization from the FAA for us to ship the complete kits. So you can probably look for kits to start to arrive at your shop sometime in September. So that's, we're on the road. Like I said, the installation is going on now. So if you do have an order in with us and I have your email address, I do send out updates from time to time, especially when something changes. Probably the next one you'll see from me is when the aircraft is getting ready for flight test. And that'll let you know that there's probably less than a month to go. Another question that I'm sure we're going to get is, what about the Twin Comanche? We'd love to do it. Right now, and Doug was working this most recently, we do have a few pre-orders in. We do need to get 15 of them to put it on the schedule. And I would really like to see that on our schedule before the end of the year. We can do that right now with the way our certification team is scheduled. It would probably be a program that would start in the fall. But it's, we do these kind of essentially on a first come, first served basis. So the sooner we get the orders in, the sooner it's on the schedule, the sooner it'll be done. So there's no question that we would do it, but we do need those 15 pre-orders. And the other big question that we're going to get, what's the cost? The list price for a 2-axis system is $19,995. I should have put the 3-axis on here because I wasn't thinking about the PA-30s. The 3-axis system is $24,995, $5,000 more. And like I said, every 3100 system, automatic pitch trim is standard. And everything that your installation shop needs is going to come in that kit. So it's complete from soup to nuts. Upgrading from existing systems, if you have a 55X with pitch trim, $99.95 is what it'll cost to upgrade to the 3100. System 30 and System 50 is about $2,000 more because most of those systems you have to add the pitch trim servo. Automatic pitch trim was not an option for the systems for the 30s or the 50s. If you have a 60-2, you're kind of in between that a little bit. I think it's about $10,500 for that upgrade. As Doug might have mentioned before, any order that we get before we issue the STC, so that would be 6 to 8 weeks from now, you will get an extended 3-year warranty on the entire system if it's a new installation. If it's an upgrade, you'll have a 3-year warranty on the controller and a 2-year warranty on your installed servos. As I said before, we're not worried about our servos. Your servos could be installed for 20 years and we'll still put a 2-year warranty on them. So why the 3100? There's a lot of options that I'm sure you all know. It is state of the art. It is clearly the best autopilot you can buy today. Pitch trim is standard on every system. So it's not an option. You don't have to worry about the thing beeping at you or trimming it. Unmatched interface options. We don't dictate what you have to have in your panel for the autopilot to work. It works with Garmin equipment, it works with Aspen equipment, it works with Avidyne equipment, it works with analog equipment. So as I mentioned earlier, over 40 years and 40,000 autopilots worth of experience. Unlike other companies that certify autopilots, it's not just one model that we cover. We do one certification and it covers the whole model line. That's because we know how they all fly. We put autopilots in all those aircraft. And lastly, we've got a dealer network second to none. A lot of the shops have been with us for many, many years. They're very experienced at our autopilots, and you can get a great installation or great troubleshooting if you have an issue with an autopilot. So with that, thank you very much. I appreciate the time. I was kidding about the 260 slides. There weren't quite that many. So I guess I just stop the share and turn it back over to you, Peter.
Hey, thank you guys so much for coming and for talking to us. It is really exciting to see a new STC autopilot for the Comanche coming this year. There's been a lot of it's coming, and now from what you're saying, it's really finally coming.
It's almost here.
It is almost here. I'm gonna just jump into the chat window and start going through the Q&A. Doug's been answering a lot of these questions as he went along, so I'm gonna go kind of quickly. People should feel free to unmute, and this, we don't usually do this, but because a lot of these are getting answered as people go along, feel free to unmute if you want to stop me or drive further into a question, and I'll just quickly stop and ask if anybody wants to jump in. Let's see. So Pete Lautensack said, how do I go about getting a 3100 for my Comanche? He's got a 260B. Who do we contact?
You'd contact your autopilot shop, or avionics shop. Most avionics shops are S-Tec dealers. We sell through the installing shops. The autopilot has to be installed by an authorized dealer, so you know you're getting a quality job.
Makes sense. Yeah. And Doug posted a link. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say the pricing that I showed was a list price for equipment. Very often shops have, an installed price, and that's where you got to get it. That will vary slightly based on your particular aircraft, what the configuration is, where parts have to go. The 3100, for example, is a radio rack mount. If you have space in your radio rack, it's pretty straightforward. If things in the radio, in the radio rack need to get moved around, it may be a little bit more complicated. So it's always best to talk to your avionics shop.
Makes sense. And Doug posted a list of dealers that you can go, or a link where you can go to find dealers in your area, which is genesis-aerosystems.com/dealer-locator. Pete Moore, go ahead.
I say, yeah, and for those who can't see the chat window who may be calling in, that is available on our website. You can go to the website, genesis-aerosystems.com, and at the very top of the page, there's a dealer locator button right there. Type in your zip code, and you can expand it out as far as you want to go. You'll find a bunch of dealers in your area.
Will that work for international people as well too, Doug?
Yes, I believe it does.
Super. From Pete Morse, is PWM control like a synthesized stepper motor?
No, it is not. A stepper motor, you send a pulse to a motor, and the motor moves one click. Step, step, step. What pulse width modulation does is it sends very rapid pulses, millisecond pulses, to the motor, and the actual mechanical structure of the motor integrates those pulses to make it a smooth rotation. So the motor is not pulsing as it moves. The perception you'll see if you look at the end of the motor with pulse width modulation drive, it's a smooth rotation.
Very cool. Steve Pratt had asked, based on I'm sure what we heard last week, will the entire PA-24 line be covered? And the answer is yes. Everything from the 180s to the 400s will be covered. Yep.
All of the PA-30s and the PA-39 will be covered by that certification as well.
Say that again?
If we do the certification in the Twin Comanches,
Oh, I see. Yes.
all of those
Yes.
models will be covered as well.
Gotcha. So the current project will cover everything from the 180s to the 400s, all of the
Correct.
PA24s. Yep.
Correct. And if
Understand.
we go on the Twins, one certification project will cover all the models of the Twins.
Copy that. And then a question from Steve Pratt. As I understand, the IAS and envelope protection will work with a dual G5 install?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Cool.
The only one where you need some additional equipment for IS and envelope protection is the Aspen without that 3100 integration software. Other than that, IS and envelope protection.
Mm-hmm. Steve, any additional questions before we jump to the next question? That's for Steve Pratt. Any additional clarification? And then I will just ask if somebody ends up with, for whatever reason, either a G5 and a GI 275 or two GI 275s, any comments?
It should work. That's what we're going to, all these different configurations are one of the things that we're going to test out in our PA24 certification flying. That aircraft does have two 275s in it. I don't know, and I can't really comment on a G5 with a 275, how that would work. We'd have to kind of get some engineering feedback on it. It's as we all know, an exciting time. I mean, there's a lot of new avionics products that have been coming out. It's a real challenge to stay ahead of those, to get autopilots to work with them. So we've, like Doug was saying, over the last few weeks, we've been doing a lot of work with the G5s, and you'll see us doing that with the 275s. Ultimately, I'm sure we'll come up with configurations on a mix of the two. So what that is, I don't know.
Yeah, I can kind of jump in here a little bit on that. Because the GI 275 puts out all the same data labels as a TXI, it would be a different setup and different configuration than a G5. So I think if you were to end up in the situation where you had a GI 275 with a G5, you would choose which one you're wiring to. And I would say the GI 275 would be primary. I'm not sure why you'd end up with a G5 and a GI 275, just based upon the features of them, unless you were doing like the engine monitor GI 275, which wouldn't have anything to do with the autopilot, and you were using the G5 for your attitude indicator and HSI. But from looking at it from the technical data, yeah, it looks like it's just going to work the same as the N600 TXIs.
So it would probably depend on how you are using, or how those instruments are being used in a particular installation. If the G5s are the primary flight instruments, that is what the autopilot would interface to. If the 275 is the primary flight instruments, that is what the 3100 would interface to. Is that kind of, I think, would sum it up.
Sure.
Helpful. Before we move on, does anybody have any other questions about GI, about the Garmin G5 or GI 275 integrations? This is your time to jump in. I'm going to be quiet and count to 5.
If not, you do have our email addresses. You can contact us anytime, and we can get the answers. So.
Yeah, just helpful sometimes when we all are hearing each other ask. So from Pete Lautensack, what equipment do you need to add if you're using, say, an Avidyne and Aspen combination, and you go for the 3100?
Right now, you don't need to add anything. That configuration would not have the indicated airspeed functions, so you would have to get the indicated airspeed kit.
And what's
for that?
What's
I think
cost for that?
$1,900.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap. We've discounted that down there for those. So one of our other pilots here who used to be on with us full-time and now he's contracting with us, he has in his dad's aircraft, the 3100 with an Aspen Max and an Avidyne. So, I mean, if that tells you anything, that's what he put in his dad's aircraft. It works great. It flies great. I've flown it. Just again, without that Aspen Max 3100 integration software, you will need that IS kit to get those features mentioned.
Good. Question from Steve for clarification: will the flight director bars come up on the glides on the G5?
No, they will not. As I mentioned, the G5 does not accept external flight director signals or data.
The thing with the G5 is the G5 is the brains of the GFC 500 autopilot system, whereas so it's not putting out flight director guidance. It's not an external autopilot putting out flight director guidance, which is then interpreted by the EFIS to display the command bars. So no, as of right now, it's not capable. I have a feeling we might be able to do something about that, but that's kind of I have an idea, let's try something out, and that's a way down the road project. So, as of right now, no.
And would they appear on the 275? What units would display the flight director bars?
GI 275 should, and I say should because I haven't seen it, touched it with my own hands and put my own eyes on it. But yes, the GI 275 does take an external flight director input to it, which the 3100 sends out. So yes, I have high level of confidence that the GI 275 will display the flight director command bars. The other ones, the Aspen non-max can display the flight director command bars, but it does need that flight director kit that Mike mentioned earlier in the presentation, which is about $2,000 on there. The TXIs all display it. So it's just really the G5 that's not capable of displaying it. For the Aspen, I find most of the time, for the guys that don't want to go to the max, or those who have the max and are not wanting to wait on the integration software, most owners do choose to go with the IAS kit on there because those are some pretty big features with the IAS and envelope protection. So most owners do choose to do that. It's total hit and miss and pilots' preference on the flight director command bars because the autopilot flies just great without the command bars. Where you would really notice not having flight director command bars would be trying to hand fly in IMC. So most owners like, well, you know what, I'm gonna save myself the 2000 and not go with the command bars, but I'm definitely doing the IS envelope protection. That being said, there's a lot of people out there who are used to flying big metal with glass in it and having this flight director command bars. And they say, nope, I can't live with it without it. Give me the extra box and let's do it. So that's total pilot's preference on there.
Helpful. Steve, did you want to clarify anything there? Or are we good to? From Peter Simpson, aside from the benefit of redundancy, curious why the 3100 incorporates a dedicated AHARS unit when installed with an Aspirin or DTX, or GTX, etc., which might be utilized to provide AHARS info. That would conceivably provide a lower cost option to those that have modern AHARS systems already installed.
Actually, we did it because it simplifies the system. It's very interesting with the different digital EFISs available, specifically Aspen and Garmin, and even amongst Garmin equipment. The way they output their digital data is different. So we would have to develop interfaces to all these different attitude sources because the way the data is presented, it is different. Their resolution's different, all kinds of things. We found it just much simpler to put, to build it into our unit, use it. It's the same thing on every aircraft.
Peter Simpson, go ahead if you wanted to explain anything further.
Oh, I was going to say, plus for analog installations, we would have to either develop, the aircraft would have to have an analog attitude source, or we would have to have an ADAHRS developed anyway. So once we developed it, it was just less expensive to include it in every unit.
Now, thank you for clarifying that. I knew there was a very simple and logical explanation. I know Garmin doesn't, famously doesn't talk to others, without a bit of prodding. So thank you.
Will it work? This is from Tim Howard. Will it work with the Dynan Skyview HDX? And Doug already clarified, but do you want to go ahead and just re-explain, Doug?
Yeah, sure. The Dynon, no, it won't, just because of the proprietary language that they use for their coding and the way that they send their coding. I believe it would need something similar to Garmin's GAD29B to convert their signals into something that's usable. That Skyview, I believe, is just designed to work with their autopilot system.
More proprietary. What is the cost for additional equipment with the Aspen Pro?
With the Aspen Pro, the only additional equipment would be the indicated airspeed kit, which is about $1,900, and then the flight director interface, which is about the same price.
And those are an either and, or you can do one, you can do the other, or you can do both, or you can do none on there and just know the restrictions that you will have.
Okay, and I'm going to jump in with two questions that I'm guessing Tom might have and one that I have. Let's say you're starting with an Aspen Pro. Can we walk through, so you could just go ahead and put the 3100 in and not add the other two boxes, and then you would have what functionality?
Everything except indicated airspeed, envelope protection, and flight director.
Correct.
Yep. And then you add, and what are most people going to add in next?
Indicated airspeed kit.
Because that gets you envelope protection as well.
Correct.
Yeah, I'd say probably 90% of the people that do it go with that indicated airspeed kit. And I'd say you're probably somewhere down around the 20-30% maybe that go with the flight director command bars, because for most people it's not that big a deal with flight director command bars, but the added safety benefits of the indicated airspeed and the envelope protection are huge.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I'm putting these in is because there's a question coming up about upgrades, but this is going to get us for a fresh install. So for a fresh install, assuming that you're the 90% of people that go with the S-Tec 3100 and the indicated airspeed kit, assuming your airplane's in rig and your wiring is not a rat's nest, which I recognize is not a guarantee, how do we look for an install in the PA24 series time-wise?
It's a guess. So anybody that quotes me on this, I'll say I was mumbling and you didn't hear it right.
They were torturing me, and then they made me answer.
Yes. A two-axis autopilot. The installation is very similar to our 55X unit. They mount in the same place, servos mount in the same place. Just a back of the envelope calculation, that's about 80 hours, and then another 10 for the trim servo. So you're looking at 90 hours, plus or minus.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So now that leads me into Joe's question. Thank you. Does anybody want to ask about fresh installs before I go on to modify the question and the answer I just put out there? Because now would be your
Trevor
chance.
Laundry from the UK. Could I just ask a question, not about a fresh install, but going back a bit? What would be the approximate cost for adding to an installation that's already got two G5s and a GTN 750 XI, upgrading an S-Tec 30?
The price to upgrade the S-Tec 30, and I'm going by memory, is about $11,995 list price.
Yeah, it's 11.95 list if you don't have automatic electric trim already. If you do
Right.
have automatic electric trim, then it's 10,495 cost for the system.
Most System 30s don't have automatic on S-Tec trim
Or
system.
yeah, or if they didn't have a manual electric trim, and that's
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So figure about 12,000 for the components, and to upgrade a System 30 would probably be 50 hours or so, because there's some rewiring and you have to install that trim servo.
Thank you. It's all very different when it comes to the UK anyway, but I just wanted a rough idea. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Trevor. The question's right on, because there are so many S-Tec 30s installed. And on a related question, Joe asked if the upgrade from an S-Tec 50 is about 12,000, what would the install cost add? About the same as the 30 or different?
About the same, because both the System 50 and the System 30 are mounted in the panel. So provided there doesn't have to be a lot of servo rewiring, that wiring already comes up behind the panel. So, and that's where on upgrades like this, that's where it really helps to have your avionics shop take a good look, because the big question comes down to how much of the existing wiring can be reused or replaced. If it's a very old installation, it may be time to replace all the wiring. So naturally the cost would be a little bit more. If it's a relatively, or I'll just say a newer installation where some of that wiring could be reused, it may be a little bit less. A lot of that depends on the condition of the wiring, how it's routed, et cetera, et cetera. So for upgrades, it's really essential to talk to your avionics shop.
It makes sense. Question from Grady. Will the 3100 be able to fly the en route VNAV of the GTN navigators?
Yes.
Yes, not currently, but yes, very, very soon. It's in development right now.
Right. The 3100 is actually a development from a Part 25 autopilot that we make called the S-Tec 5000, which is fully VNAV capable. So the VNAV is already built into it. It's just that up until a year ago or even less, there was actually no VNAV signaling available in the Part 23 world. The output from the GTNs is the first there is. So when that came out, we knew what we had to work with, and we will get there. So we're working on it now.
Huh. Is there an estimated delivery date?
No, there isn't.
I hate giving dates on software because it's always subject to change and slide, especially when you have the FAA involved for certification, and especially with Corona going on right now. I hate giving dates. I wish I could, but I've also seen it where, oh boy, I'm glad I didn't give a date on that before. But I will say it's a very high priority level for us, and it is coming in a very soon upgrade.
And just to let you know, any existing 3100 will be able to be upgraded to VNAV.
Outstanding. And it will be a software upgrade?
It will be a hardware upgrade as well, because on an existing unit, right now, there is no VNAV button.
Gotcha. For those who jump onto the 3100 early, will you be including the VNAV upgrade as part of the just, thanks for being here early, we're going to help you out?
No, we're not. But
okay.
We have worked out some ways to price that upgrade that it's a lot more palatable, put it that way.
Super. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I knew everybody would have that question. From Hank Spellman, will there be a control head option, sorry guys, similar to the 60-2 head?
No, there won't.
Yeah, currently there's no plans for that. That's something that's been brought up before for people with limited panel space. You know, is there an option to build into something the size of a 60-2 or a 30? That's not something that we're currently looking into. Not to say that it might not happen in the future. We're always listening to customers' input, and if there's a way that we can find a way to make something better for everyone, we'll definitely look into it. But as of right now, there is no plans for that.
Mm. And then here's one that I think a lot of people will be wondering. Have you tested with the Aerovonics, UAvionics AV30?
No, I saw that come out a while ago when it was first announced, when it was Aerovonics before the merger there. I saw that come out. We got some early talks with them, and then they got bought out by UAvionics. And we're still kind of continuing talks with them. It's something I would love to see happen, just because competition in the industry is always great. It breeds new innovation. And we want to be able to interface with everything out there. Their initial plans when they were under their own umbrella, their initial plans was to begin interfacing with legacy S-Tec autopilot systems as the first thing they were going to interface with, and then possibly look to interface with the more digital autopilots in the future. I think they're going to need some sort of a GAD29B style conversion box if they're designing it the way they had talked about earlier. It's definitely possible. It's definitely something that we're willing to look into. And our tech guys have been in contact with them on that.
Helpful. I have a feeling you're going to have a fair amount of market pressure from people asking you to figure that one out. So another question that's come in, how deep is the control head? Will it fit into a Comanche center stack below the audio, ADS-B, big screen navigator, and backup radio? And just to get to why that question is being asked, the cross cables cross relatively low in the panel in the center stack, and so there's at the very bottom there's a bit more limited space.
The dimensions on the control head itself are 1.47 inches tall, 6.15 wide, and about 9 inches deep. And then you got to have a little bit of room back there for the connector as well. So probably closer to 10 and a half, 11 inches probably in depth on the thing with the wire bundle.
In a typical installation, we recommend mounting the 3100 a little higher in the stack because it's also your mode enunciator and it's easier to see.
Mm-hmm. So we just got a note back from Zach that we've got 4 to 5 inches available in that area, so it's not going to fit down below the at the bottom of the center stack. Let's see. And then can you reiterate how to get the 3-year warranty?
If an order is placed for a 3100, specifically for the PA24 prior to S-Tec issuing the STC, which is now looking like, towards the end of August, you'll get a 3-year warranty.
Mm-hmm. Good. And I have people asking about whether we can put together a group buy special price as we've been doing with Electro Air and some of the other systems. So
no, that's why we have the 3-year warranty.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Then a couple of questions that are more general. Is there a standards body? And if not, does there need to be a standards body? Is it something that owners could get together and push for?
For what standards?
Primarily, it would probably be protocol between, in other words, it would be communications protocol because so much of this is moving to software.
The AirInc standards, I think, were meant to be that standard, but there is a lot of leeway, and quite frankly, a lot of manufacturers, specifically Garmin, likes to keep things to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're not good sharers.
I think we have owners, as owners, have noticed that. It's the old Apple versus Windows. Is it going to be super interoperable, or am I going to, be generic? Am I going to be a monopoly, or am I going to play in the big field? So we understand that, but it was a question because you, as certifiers and manufacturers and designers, have a different perspective. And if there's some way that we as owners and operators can help improve the situation for us and for everybody, you might have information to help us do that.
Yeah, I'll take off my S-Tec hat and just put on my Mike hat for a minute. I think it would be great. And in fact, from S-Tec standpoint, you can see from what we were just talking about how we work our butts off to interface to everything. And what a challenge it is, especially with new avionics coming out, every month there's something new that we have to work with. So if there was a standard that we could work with, I'm sure we would be very interested in working on that, promoting that, or whatever. Right now, that doesn't exist. So it probably would take an effort from all participants, including aircraft owners, to start to push for that. But ultimately, there's going to have to be an industry. The industry is going to have to agree on it. That's always difficult.
Yep. Before we get, I'd like to pursue that a little bit further, but we have one more question that's come in. How is Avidyne to work with, as far as integrating with the Avidyne devices?
No problems at all. It's a AirInc 429 interface. So
once again, enabled by the standards.
Right.
So if we were to, part of the thing that's driving this is a discussion that an owner had with me about the average price of the Comanche airframe versus the Comanche avionics. It's true for any aircraft, but it's particularly true for ours, where we have these immortal airframes. They were zinc chromated, and they were built very strong. So our airframes are elegant, they're swift, they're strong, they're great IFR platforms. But because we were built at earliest 49 years ago, they are dated. The avionics, the panels are typically dated. And so from our standpoint, as a group of 4,000 owners worldwide, the ability to do a consistent and relatively cost-effective avionics upgrade is really valuable to our type. We are worth a couple of $2 billion collectively, even at our current market prices. And, or let's see, 4,000 times, yeah. And so it's there's a certain amount of, if we stop and think about just how much we're all going to spend, there's a certain amount of real economic interest that probably could be put together. And then if you bring in all the other types, you could and run that kind of an argument. They're not all as old as we are as a group, but they've got the same problems. So the next question might be, what are the key safety arguments, just talking about autopilots, because we can start in one place. What are the key safety benefits of having an autopilot over hand flying everywhere that we would really want to make somewhat consistent? And that will cover integration, that'll cover human factors.
I mean, just from flying aircraft, the decreased pilot workload even in VFR flying. Imagine, if you will, and I know I'm looking at the screen, there's probably a lot of guys out there whose first car did not have a cruise control or did not have air conditioning, had a AM radio with buttons on it. And after you drove that car for 3 or 4 hours, you were wiped out. So an autopilot is beneficial like that. Although I haven't traveled much this year, my typical schedule has me out of the office, every other week, traveling to visit avionics shops, and I do a lot of driving. And without a cruise control, I could not get that done. But with a car with a cruise control and air conditioner, I can. Imagine that even in a VFR flight, Now, your workload is done, and when you get to where you're going, and typically that's a high stress area, probably an airport you've never been to, an area you're not familiar with. It's nice to be relaxed and refreshed. And I'm sure everybody here that's an instrument pilot can relate to that even more so in IMC conditions, where it is almost essential to have that co-pilot with you. So from a safety standpoint, just autopilots in general, I don't think there's a question anymore about their benefit.
I will second that exactly. You know, the Comanche that I had for the last 9.5 years, well, actually more than that, 15 years, had no autopilot. And so my left arm was the autopilot. I fly by myself a lot. And the one I'm flying now has the S-Tec 50 rather, and I am totally spoiled already, just since November when I got it. To be able to say, hey, can you take it for a minute? All by that alone makes the autopilot worth it. Because I can actually unfold a map and look at it without the plane going off to the Netherlands. And if I'm into the clouds, I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm straight and level or gaining or losing altitude or whatever. The autopilot will keep me honest. It's great. It is like having a co-pilot, as you said. It's just like having a co-pilot in the plane with you, and it takes all that stress away.
Right. And that's under normal conditions. Now, have ATC call you and reroute you, or the engine really sounds a little different when you get into the clouds, or you have a passenger with you all of a sudden starts to get sick. I mean, there's lots of things that can take a nice smooth flight and make it a little bumpy. That autopilot really makes a difference.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I love hand flying as much as the next guy. When I was flying for the airlines, I would routinely hand fly it up to 18,000 and fly most of the descent on there down from cruise, just because I loved flying the plane. But when I get there, when I get up to altitude, you throw on that autopilot. Or when you're coming into busy airspace, when you're coming into LAX and you've got the controllers yelling at you 1 million words a minute, and it's definitely nice to have that, take that stress off and know that the plane is doing what you want it to do, what you intend it to do, and it's doing it safely, so that you can monitor everything else and check your approach plates and charts and all that. And that's just with any autopilot. That's with any of our legacy systems. Having that there to help you out is nice. Now you throw in the added benefits that come with the 3100 of indicated airspeed mode for climbs to keep you a little bit safer, envelope protection, and you can brief your passenger who might not know anything about flying. But you've got a passenger sitting next to you and you say, hey, if I'm becoming incapacitated, hit this button, jump on the radio and ask for help. So it's massive safety increase with the new technology over what was already a very essential piece of equipment.
And I'm going to invite everybody to just unmute and jump in, because this conversation, I think, is important. Hank had a comment.
Yes. Many of the early Comanches, particularly the 58s, 59s like I have, and the 60s, only came with 60 gallons and thus were retrofitted with tip tanks. When I put in my 60-2, I asked for a modification, which was granted, which was simply tapping off the signal to the roll servo, which would light up 1 or 2 lights saying whether the servo was providing left aileron or right aileron. I have an aftermarket aileron trim called Aero Trim, which I use to trim it for lateral stability. And the autopilot will hold it up fine, but if you've got a severe imbalance in fuel, which happened to be once, I can tell you, punching off the envelope, the autopilot when you're slow and don't know you're way out can give a very interesting ride.
Absolutely, and that is the very reason that we have included automatic pitch trim in the 3100. There are not, and I'm sure you'll agree, there's not many Part 23 airplanes, especially smaller aircraft, that have aileron trim. Okay, they're pretty stable laterally. But the same thing happens with an autopilot. If you don't keep the pitch in trim, you can punch it off at the wrong time and get a real exciting ride.
Well, what I was saying is, if you might want to jot this number down. November 5903 Papa. S-Tec, when I put it in, supplied that for me, and all it is, it's not direct connected to the aileron trim. It just lights a light and says you need some left aileron or you need some right aileron trim. And it really makes it wonderful, and it saves a lot of wear and tear on your roll servo.
Right, well, but, and I'll say years ago, there were a lot of things that could be done that can't be done anymore. What it sounds like is they have the same trim switch setup that we use in our pitch servos. That and with a pitch servo, there's micro switches in it that when it gets out of trim, it either, in the case of the 3100 or a 55X with automatic pitch trim, will automatically correct that condition. Yes. In a System 30 or a System 50, that's what lights up your up-down light to tell you that you're out of trim. And that's the same thing you're doing in a roll. So I would guess it was a modification of that. I know a couple of years ago, there was a company, we were working on a special program, and they actually needed a yaw trim for this aircraft. We actually used the pitch computer out of a 60-2 because it had the trim circuitry built in to do the automatic yaw trim.
That's exactly how it was done. And it's not connected directly to the roll trim. It simply lights a light and says, you do it, and I have to punch another button.
Right, right. Yeah, I could see how that could be done on a 60-2 in particular. So.
Yeah, so you've got the number, and it's all in the STC for that airplane.
So I think probably what they did was they issued a letter of no technical objection to making a modification to your installation on there.
What year was that done?
Probably around 2000, something like that.
Like I said, it was what I would say is a minor system modifications, but were a lot easier to get through the FAA at that time.
Well, you've already got, if you look at that one, you've already got an approval from them.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. I mean, if it's not directly connected to, affected by, or driving the autopilot system, if it's a roll sensor switch that's driving an LED light, it might be possible to get it through.
That's all it is. And there are a lot of Comanches with tip tanks. Singles, I'm talking about.
Sure.
Just wanted to ask Pete Lautensack to jump in. He had an interesting question. At least I think that was him on 8966 Pup. Or if not, actually, let me see if I can just read it in. Can you talk to Garmin features versus the S-Tec 3100 features, the Garmin GFC 500 versus the S-Tec 3100? You knew this was going to come from somebody, so here it is.
In a lot of ways, they're very similar modes. The 3100 is standard with pitch trim, which is an option on the GFC 500. Probably the biggest thing is that the 3100 doesn't lock you into any particular equipment. It's up to you to choose the avionics that you want to install. With the GFC 500, you're very limited on what you can install. You have to have 2 G5s. You have to have, well, I guess it does work with Avidyne equipment now, but there are some limitations on what you can do.
We're listening. In terms of if you go Garmin, it's limited because of the limited interfaces.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's limited with the interface on there. The GFC 500 and 600 are great systems too. They're another good option out there. One other kind of major difference is TSO'd versus non-TSO'd, so held to a little bit different standard of engineering and certification. And then, like Mike said, the choices, the 3100 is more flexible with giving you more choice with your current avionics and future avionics. So like Mike said, you know, it seems like every day something new comes out. You have a lot more ability to interface with new avionics down the road with the 3100 just because of the way it's designed and how flexible it is with interfacing stuff. So you're not limiting yourself down the road.
Probably the single biggest difference is that at the end of August, you can put a 3100 in your Comanche.
That actually is a huge difference. It is very exciting. I have to say, I think some of us wanted to stand up and cheer when we saw that the news was that this is actually coming, like at the end of summer. It's this in 2020, there will be a new autopilot for Comanches.
And it's not going to be restricted to the 260Cs or whatever. So.
Yep, the late 250s and 260Cs. Right. Yeah, no, very, very exciting. For those who might be interested in doing an upgrade from a non-S-Tec autopilot, so I'm thinking about the fair number that have old installed systems, and there are generally two types. There are still a few legacy and plenty of placarded and op auto controls in there, but there are also the Ultimatic 2s and 3s that really did yeoman service for 50 years. For those doing an autopilot upgrade to the S-Tec, what should they expect?
It's a fresh install. That whole system needs to come out and the 3100 installed. The thing you have to remember is that an autopilot is a system. It's not just a box or like a radio. You know, so the whole system has to change because each manufacturer has their own servos, their own interconnect, you know, the way it ties in between the controller and the servo. All of that is all part of that single certified autopilot system.
So the old servos come out, the new servos go in. Are there, in terms of, have you seen many of these done where, can we reuse the same mounting places, or how does it all work?
It's a completely different system. The servos may be mounted in approximately the same location, but the mounting hardware and all that kind of stuff is generally all completely different. The other thing we know is that we don't recommend and we won't condone reusing servo mounting hardware because if it has to be reused, it could be re-drilled. And as soon as you start drilling extra holes in aircraft metal, you potentially could be weakening it or, you know, have some structural issues. So it's not really worth it.
Yeah, and then conversely to that, that's the reason why, that's another big part of the reason, besides the great history of proven reliability of our servos, that's another huge reason why we decided to use the same servos and just change up the way we drive them. So that somebody with a legacy S-Tec system, they're not looking at replacing all the servos and doing new brackets and new hardware, and we can knock about $10,000 off the price of the system for upgrading from a legacy S-Tec system. Now, unfortunately, that's not an option when changing from brand A to brand B, and that's not S-Tec specific. That's anybody. I mean, if you're putting in a GFC 500, you're looking at a full fresh install too, just because you're getting all different hardware, different servos that are being driven differently. But that was definitely a major thought process, was how can we help save the owners money? And we looked at it and said, well, these servos work great. Let's change the way we drive them, but let the servos and the hardware stay in place so we can help people save about $10,000 off the price of the system.
Yes. Yep. Yep. And I'm going to ask one more question. Garmin, some of these are coming in as private chats, I think, from people who have other family members who turned in early. What is the reason? So Garmin, I believe last week, made a guesstimate that the install would be on the order of 60 hours. Do you have a sense as to the delta in the estimated install times of 60 versus 90, or is it more that we're doing an apples to oranges comparison? Should they be quite similar?
A little bit of apples and oranges. A lot of, we've installed 40,000 autopilots.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a lot of those threads on the different forums, the Beach Talk, the Pilots of America, everything we're saying, where people are asking, what were you quoted for an install and what did it actually cost? And a lot of times, a shop that'll quote low hours ends up going over on that. So I think with the numbers Mike's throwing out, that it's definitely a lot safer number that's probably closer to reality. But as he mentioned, it's always best, don't hold us to those numbers. It's always best to talk to a shop or two or three and get quotes for what the install is going to really end up being. And no matter whose system you go with, whether you go with ours or you go with another choice on the market, get a quote for a full functional installed complete system. Our pricing includes all the hardware kit, everything you need. Some of the others out there, they advertise a low entry price, but then you've got all this other optional equipment that's really required to make it run. So no matter what you do, call around, talk to a shop, because they're going to give you the best estimate on times, because it's going to be different for every aircraft. It's going to be different based upon additional STC equipment. And frankly, it's also going to be different shop to shop based upon their experience, knowledge, and availability. So it's always best to get that number from a dealer or two or three, rather than the guesstimates that we would throw out as more generalization.
Yep. I've got one more coming in into the chat. What's the cost delta? Now here, this might get to your Genesis's plans for the 30s, 50s, 55s, et cetera, 60s. Are people still going to be able to decide, am I going to install the 30, 55, 50, 60, or 3100, or is Genesis moving everybody to, we're going to continue to support but not to sell the older ones? What's Genesis's plan here?
I have sold every one of our autopilots this year. System 30s and 55Xs remain very popular. I mean, the System 30, its big advantage is it takes no panel modification. You put the controller in where the turn coordinator is. So that reduces installation time on some aircraft. It's an option, it's like the only option. The other reason we'll keep selling those is that even though we are certifying the 3100 in a wide range of aircraft, last week we got STCs in Piper Navajos, Cheyennes, and all the King Air 90 series. So we're continuously working on STCs, but ultimately there are going to be a number of airframes that just the 3100 isn't. There's not enough of those airframes around to justify a 3100 certification. However, some of our other autopilots, a 30, a 50, or a 55X, are already certified in those aircraft, so we'll continue to produce those. And anybody that's flying a 60-2, I know I've sold new ones this year, so we're going to continue to support that autopilot that we've been making for 40 years. We're going to still continue to support that for quite a while yet.
Yeah.
That is wonderful news. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Doug.
We still make them, we still support them. There's no plans on changing that. anytime soon. That being said, if we have a 3100 certified for an aircraft, that is in 99% of the cases the only choice that really makes sense. You look at the price delta between a System 30 and a 55X, or a System 30 and a 3100, and they're already pretty close. Now, most people that do a 30 are going to want that GPSS roll steering converter to give them the GPSS with the 30. That puts it knocking right on the door of the 3100 price. Just based upon technology, the newer technology, it's easier and more cost effective to build, and we're trying to keep the price as low as possible on it. So if we have the 3100 certified, that's almost always the best choice. If we don't have the 3100 certified, the 55X is certified for almost everything with 2 wings and a motor out there, and that's usually the best choice, unless you're running into panel space, or if you say, you know what, I just want a super simple wings leveler, give me the cheapest system you have, 1 axis, that's all I want, that's all I care about, then we still have those options and we still support them. But for the minimal price difference across the systems, the 3100 is almost always the best choice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is brilliant. I've got one more question, and then I'm going to just throw open the doors for a few moments, and then we've been at it a long time. The other question is, can you help understand the install differences between the 30s, 50s, etc., and the 3100s? And I think they're looking at, well, if I were to go from nothing to something, what are going to be my overall costs?
The servo mounts and locations are the same for all our autopilots. Okay, the pitch servo mounts and where the pitch servo goes, no matter which autopilot you have. The different autopilots really have completely different form factors. System 60-2 uses remote pitch and roll computers with a panel mounted controller. The System 40 and 50 has a panel mounted controller, but it also has integrated pitch and roll computers. So that's all in one box. System 30 was designed to put all the roll components in the turn coordinator, and it has a separate small pitch computer. So it's really a form factor. The 55X, very much like the 3100, with the exception of 55X is an analog autopilot, they're radio rack mounted. All of the computers, drivers, everything are inside the 55X as they are the 3100. So it's basically a difference in form factors. Obviously, with the 3100, you have very much different technology involved. So.
Perfect. And that's a really helpful summary for everybody who wants to come back and replay the end of our Q&A. There it is in a nutshell. Well, so first of all, thank you so much for putting the time together and for that extremely helpful prezo and for paying attention to our airplanes. Does anybody have any other questions before we close up and wrap up? One more question from Linda Reaver on the West Coast. Any way to get envelope protection with a 30?
Unfortunately not. The envelope protection, as we've mentioned several times here, is dependent on the indicated airspeed information. And the System 30 basically has altitude hold as its pitch mode. So it has no way to get the indicated airspeed information into the unit. And to flash back, when the System 30 was designed, there probably wasn't much electronic ways to get indicated airspeed information.
Yeah, and not only that, but it's also, there's a lot of tuning that goes into getting envelope protection functioning. It's not just clicking a couple buttons on a line of code and saying, hey, if you hit 90 knots, pitch for 100. Like I mentioned with the flight testing, we go out and we load up 25-pound bags of shot, and we load it in the nose and give it the most forward CG that's in the envelope possible, and then we go out and fly it. and we hook the computer up to it, and we're actually tuning it while we're flying it, and we run it up to the high speed and then say, okay, when you hit the high speed, now you're going to pitch for this new target, and we mess with the code to see how quickly it happens to make sure that it's responsive enough, but it's not too aggressive and going to rip the wings off the thing. And then, you know, we do that the same thing at the slow speed, and then we shift the weight completely around and go do it aft and make sure that it's responsive enough to control it, but it's not, you know, sending everyone into 0G when it's pushing over, and it's not damaging it when you're trying to pitch up at the high speed. So there's a lot more to it than just plugging in some airspeed values. So you really need the digital autopilot technology in order to make that happen in a safe and functional way.
Very, very helpful. Wow, there is a lot to digest. This is fantastic. I just want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank the whole Comanche Zoom team that's behind this. There's a bunch of folks from the Northeast Tribe. Couldn't do this without Pat Kiefer, Russ Wright, Kristen Winter, and there's kind of a cast of thousands that's joined in. But Doug and Mike, thank you so much for being here, both on the 21st when you gave us a hint, and the fact that we're going to see a new autopilot this this summer, early fall is pretty thrilling.
Pleasure to be here. It's, you know, I mean, what's bad about sitting around talking about airplanes?
Yeah, exactly.
Yep, definitely. I mean, that's the reason we're all in this business is it's a passion for us. We're all, as you may have guessed, you know, pretty involved in this because we like doing it. So we definitely appreciate everyone's time here and letting us share that information.
And like I said, I think, Doug, I saw you put up a note earlier that had our emails on it. My email address is on our website. So if there's any questions that pop into your head tonight, I know 1 o'clock in the morning, you get up and you go, oh, geez, now I remember that question. Email it to me, and I'll if I can't answer it, I know somebody who can.
Perfect. And I just want to hand it back to Pete Morse to close out the meeting. Pete is definitely core to making all this work.
All right. We are,
Good deal.
I think we're pretty much at the end here. We've been on it for, it's almost 9:45. So we've set a new record. Again, I second CJ, Mike and Doug, tremendous bit of information. And we thank you very much for all the work you've done for tonight, and also for when you participated earlier in that round robin about the autopilots. And I'm sure people will have some messages to send to you at your email. So we'll end up with ending here. We don't have anything planned for Sunday, but next Thursday night we're on again now with one more of the autopilot groups, and then we'll go from there. So with that, we'll say good night. I guess Robert is the one that ends up shutting us down.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Keep the sunny side up. Thanks, everybody.
CJ, I'll leave it on for a minute or two here.
Okay, I'm leaving.
All right, Pete. Take care. We'll talk to you later. Okay, everyone. This is the end of the show. You'll have a good night. See you next Thursday. Good night.